This is Unit 7 review for Math 2. So what I'm going to do for you today is I'm going to work every problem on this review page, and then I'm going to let you use it on the test as your cheat sheet. So please make sure you're following along with me, and please make sure you're taking really good notes to understand exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, all right, these first 6 questions are matching. We just have to look at the pictures on this side and match them with the vocabulary words on that side. So I'm just going to look at the pictures and I'm going to match it to the vocabulary words. So I have a triangle here that I'm looking at. So I need to know what kind of a triangle that is. So when I look at this, I can see that the 3 sides don't measure the same, which makes that a scalene triangle. So I know 6 is going to be A. And then I like to just cross off my choices or whatever so that I know that I've already used it. So I'm going to look at picture B now. When I look at picture B, I know that those 2 are a linear pair. They form a straight line together. I also know if they're a linear pair that they're supplementary, meaning they're going to add up to 180 degrees. So when I look over there at my choices, I have complementary angles, vertical angles, supplementary angles, isosceles triangle, and alternate interior angles. That tells me that B has to be the supplementary angles because they add up to 180 degrees. And then I'm done with that picture. So looking at C, I know we're talking about some kind of angles that have those 2 lines that intersect there. So I'm thinking here when I'm looking at this that I'm looking at angles that are on opposite sides of each other, and that's always going to be vertical angles. So vertical angles is C, and I'm just going to scribble it out so I know I used it. Okay, the next picture on picture D, that is a 90-degree angle broken into 2 pieces, a 60-degree angle and a 30-degree angle. Because those add up to be 90, I know that they're complementary. So complementary is number 1 up there. It's going to be D. The next picture is a kind of a triangle. The triangle has 2 equal sides on it. The 2 equal sides means it's going to be isosceles. So I'm going to be E here, which automatically tells me where F is going to be. But the reason that those are alternate interior angles is they're inside the parallel lines on opposite sides of this transversal. So F is going to be alternate interior angles. All right, our next 2 problems, number 7 and number 8, are down below there. Number 7 says the sum of the angles in any triangle always totals, and that answer would be 180 degrees. All of the angles in a triangle always add up to be 180 degrees. That doesn't really look like a degree mark there. I'm trying to fix it for you. 180 degrees. Number 8, the following is an example of, so let's take a look at it and see. I have parallel lines cut by a transversal. Now these are not both inside the parallel lines and they're not both outside, which means I completely eliminate alternate interior, alternate exterior, and consecutive interior. So then I know that one of the kind I have left is corresponding. Corresponding means they're in the same position on the cross. Do we see how this one is in the upper right-hand position of the cross that's formed? And then this one again is the upper right-hand position in the cross. Because those are in the same position on the cross, these are called corresponding. So corresponding angles. All right, let's go on to the next questions. Number 9, it says solve for x. In order to solve for x, I first have to identify what kind of angles these are. So I'm looking at my parallel lines. I can see that I have 2 parallel lines here. I can see that they're cut by a transversal, and I can see that these are both outside the parallel lines. So they're exterior angles. They're on opposite sides of the transversal, so they're alternate exterior angles. And the rule that I know about alternate exterior angles is that alternate exteriors are congruent or equal to each other. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to set them equal to each other. I'm going to go x plus 136, and I'm going to equal that to 130 because I know those two angles are equal to each other. Then I just have to subtract the 136 to get the x by itself. When I do that, it cancels over here to just be x, and on this side I get -6. So my x value there for this problem is going to be x equals -6, which is kind of a funny number when we're talking about measurements of angles. But if I were to substitute that number back in, it will work just fine. So -6 plus 136 is 130, and then that would be equal to the other side. All right, number 10. In order to solve for x here, I have to first identify what kind of angles they are. These are inside the parallel lines on the same side of the transversal. That makes them consecutive interior angles. And I know the rule. All right, I'm not 100% sure what happened, but my video got paused somehow. So I just am going to stay on this problem for just a minute because I'm not sure that this problem got finished in my recording. So I have decided to set these two angles equal to each other because they were alternate exterior angles. So I did x plus 136 equals 130. And then I subtracted the 136 over. And I got x equals -6. So again, I'm just going to sit here for a minute and let you finish copying that down if you didn't get that. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure where the video stopped recording. So take a chance and write this one down, and we'll go on to number 10. And we might have already been on number 10. I'm not 100% sure, but let's do it again. On number 10, when I'm looking at my two angles here, I have two parallel lines cut by a transversal. So here's my two parallel lines. Here's my transversal. Both of those angles are on the inside of the parallel lines. Because they're on the inside of the parallel lines, I know they're either alternate interior angles or they're consecutive interior angles. Because they're next to each other with nothing in between them, they're consecutive interior angles. And the one thing that I know about consecutive interior angles is that they add up to be 180. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add those two angles together and set them equal to 180. So I like to add them before I write them down. So x plus x is 2x. 91 plus 97 is 188. And I know those are going to be equal to 180. And then I just solve that problem from there. So I'm going to subtract that 188 to the other side. So I get 2x equals -8. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And I get x equals -4 for my solution. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Number 11. I have two parallel lines cut by a transversal again, so I need to decide what kind of angles these are so I know which rule to follow. Both the 25x minus 2 and the 24x plus 1 are on the outside of the parallel lines. They're on opposite sides of the transversal. So outside parallel lines on opposite sides of the transversal, those would be alternate exterior angles. And we know alternate exterior angles are equal to each other, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go 25x minus 2, and I'm going to equal that to 24x plus 1, and I'm going to continue to solve this for x. Now, when I have x's on both sides of my equation, the very first thing I like to do is get all the x's together. So I'm going to move this positive 24x over to the other side by subtracting it over. It cancels over here, which is what I wanted it to do, so I'm just stuck with the 1 on this side. Over here, 25x minus 24x is just a 1x, and I'd still have minus 2. So 1x minus 2 equals 1. Again, trying to isolate that x, I'm going to add that 2 to the other side, and I get 1x equals 3. I don't have to show the 1 on the x, so I'm done right there. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Number 12. So I'm gonna decide what kind of angles those are, and then I'm going to use the rule. So these angles are actually in the same position on the cross. If you notice, that's the upper left-hand corner of the cross, and then again below the upper left-hand corner of the cross. So those are called corresponding angles. We know corresponding angles are congruent, so that means they're equal to each other. So I'm going to go 65 equals 13x, and then I'm just going to solve that. To solve for the x, I'm going to divide both sides by 13, and that's going to give me my x value. 65 divided by 13 is 5. So my answer for number 12 is x equals 5. Okay, number 13, we're on to a triangle now. We know that all three angles of a triangle add up to be 180 degrees. So what I have here that I can do is I can do it a couple of different ways. I can see that these add up to 120. And if these two, 70 plus 50, add up to 120, then there's really only 60 degrees left for this angle to be. So I sometimes like to do that. If I know that this angle is equal to 60 degrees, then I can go x plus 67 equals 60 and just solve for that. Another way I could have done that is I could have added all three angles together and equaled it to 180. So I could have gone x plus, and then 50 plus 70 is 120. 120 plus 67 is 187. So I would have been x plus 187 equals 80. I'm sorry, 180. And I would have to just solve from there. Either way, when you do it, you're going to get the same answer, which is x equals -7. All right, next problem. On number 14. Again, we know all three angles in the triangle have to add up to 180 degrees. I know this is a 90-degree angle and a 70-degree angle. So 90 plus 70 is 160. So out of the 160 degrees, I know that this last angle has to be equal to the number 20. Because 20 plus the 160 would give you 180. So I'm going to go 20 equals x plus 29, and I'm just going to solve it from there. Subtract that 29 over to the other side, and I get x equals -9. All right, number 15, again, the same thing. All three angles in the triangle add up to be 180. So I'm going to take 180 and I'm going to subtract those two off. So 180 minus 60, and then that number minus 45, and I get a total of 75 left. So I know that this angle right here would be equal to 75 degrees. So 15x equals 75. Then I just have to solve for the 15. So I would divide both sides by 15, and I would get x equals 5. So really these all kind of work the same way. Figure out how many degrees are left and then solve the equation for x. Okay, this next one, number 16, though, has a different rule. So we did have a rule that taught us that if we had the two interior angles of a triangle, we knew that they equaled the exterior angle on the other side. So we know if we add those two angles together, they're going to equal the 10x. So I'm just going to add them together. I have 6x. And then I have a -12 and a positive 60, which is going to add up to be 48. So 6x plus 48. And I know it has to be equal to that other angle, or the other measure of the angle, which is 10x. Now I have x's on both sides of my equal sign. So my first goal always is to get all of the x's together. So because the 10x is over on the one side by itself, I'm going to subtract the 6x over to be with it. So minus the 6x over, and I get 48 equals 4x. Then again, get that x by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals 12 for the solution to number 16. All right. Number 17 works exactly the same way. Here's my two interior angles of the triangle. Here's my exterior angle of the triangle. So I'm going to set them, these two I'm going to add together, and I'm going to set it equal to that top one up there. So down here I would have 5x, and then I have a positive 1 and a positive 81, which is an 82. So I have 5x plus 82, and I know that's going to be equal to 11x plus 10. And then I'm just going to solve this for x. Again, anytime I have x's on both sides of my equal sign, my very first goal is to get the x's together. I like to try to keep my x's positive after I move them. So I'm going to move the smaller number, the 5x, over to be with the 11. It cancels on this side and I get 82. On the other side I have 11 minus 5, which is 6. And I still have plus 10. So now my goal is to get that 6x all by itself. So I'm going to subtract the 10 to the other side. So I get 72 equals 6x. Then get rid of the 6 by dividing both sides by 6. And I get x equals 12 for my solution. All right, we have one more of the same kind. Seems like it's a lot. So this angle 20 goes down in here. So I know that these two angles add together to be equal to the third angle. So I'm going to do it that same way. The 7x is by itself. I have a 20 and a negative 1, which adds to be 19. And then it's equal to 9x plus 1. And I'm just going to solve that. Again, my first goal is to get all the x's together on one side. So I'm going to subtract that 7x to be over there with those 9x's. And I get 19 equals 2x plus 1. I'm going to minus that 1 to the other side. So I get 18 equals 2x. Then get that 2 off the x by dividing by 2. And I get x equals 9 for my final answer. All right, that seems like we did plenty of that same kind of problem there. So hopefully you've got that one in the bag. Let's take a look at the next one. Number 19 here is a little bit different. It kind of wants us to just go around until we can find the value of x. So here's the value of x right here. So let's just see what we can figure out. So I'm just going to start down here at the 91 because I know something down here. Not at the 91, I'm sorry, the 109. I'm going to start down there at the 109. I know that those two angles together, the 109 and the missing angle down there, will add up to 180 because they're a linear pair. So I'm going to do 180 minus 109 to get this angle right here, which is 71. Now I do know that if this one's 71 degrees, that this one is also 71 degrees. Because these lines right here tell me that those two angles are equal down there at the base because it's an isosceles triangle. Now, if I know that this angle is 71 right here, and this angle is 71, then I can find that third angle in the triangle by subtracting the 71 and the 71 from the 180. And when I do that, I get 38. So this angle right here is 38 degrees. I know that all right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 90 minus the 38 degrees, and that's going to get me this side of the angle over here. So 90 minus 38 would be 52. So this angle right here is 52 degrees. And then I know 52 and 180 form a straight line together. So if I do 180 minus the 52, then I would have the answer for x. So 180 minus 52 degrees is 128 degrees. So my x value is 128 degrees. All right, next problem. I don't remember putting any ones really hard like this on the test, so hopefully you'll agree when you see the test. I'm not sure though. Maybe you won't like them. All right, if I know that this side over here is 128, and I know that they form a straight line together here, then I'm going to take 180 and minus 28 to get 52 for this little angle right here. Now I'm trying to make it over to x over here. This is my goal to get to here. So I kind of could go either direction, but I kind of really know I need to go this way so that I can get into that triangle. So I'm going to go this way. I know that these two angles right here form that right angle together. So if I do 90 minus 52, I get 38. So this is a 38-degree angle. And do you see how these two lengths are marked the same, which means the base angles will be the same. So that one's also 38 degrees. So then I do 3 angles in a triangle, add up to 180. So I do 180 and I subtract 38 twice. And when I do that, I get 104 degrees for that top angle right there. All right, 21 through 24 are just telling what kind of angle relationships they are. So when you have the two angles that cross each other, and we're looking at the angles right across from each other, those are vertical angles. So vertical angles for those. On number 22, we have parallel lines cut by a transversal. Those angles are both in the upper left-hand corner of the crosses. When we're in the same position, that's called corresponding. So those are corresponding angles. On 23, those two angles form a right angle together. And when we have two angles that form a right angle together, they're called complementary. So those are complementary angles. And then on 24, we have two lines cut by a transversal. The two angles that we're looking at are on opposite sides of the transversal inside the parallel lines. So these are alternate interior angles. All right, let's keep moving. 25 says, find the length of AC. Now this is pretty easy because we have this rule that said the mid segment was half as much as the end segment. So if this mid segment is 4, then the end segment is going to be 8 because I just need to double it to get to the end segment. Same kind of an idea here. It says to find CD. This time though they gave me the end segment and I need to find the mid segment. The mid segment is always half of that end one. So if that end one is 16, then that half of that would have to be 8. Same kind of problem again right here. Again, if our end is 30, how much is PQ going to be? The mid segment? Well, it's going to be half of 30, which means my answer is going to be 15. It's kind of nice to have some easy ones here, isn't it? 28, find IK. So I'm looking for this length right here. They gave me the mid segment this time. I'm getting bigger. I'm going to double it to get to that end, which is 10. All right, we only have 4 more problems left. Yay. 29. This time we have to do some math behind the rule that we just said. We know that if we double this, it will equal that. That's what we do. We double the little one to get to the big one. So I'm going to go 2 times 2x minus 3. And I know that's going to equal to x plus 9. And I really just have to solve all that math. So first distribute the 2 through to get 4x minus 6 equals x plus 9. And then solve this equation for x. So I have x's on both sides of my equal sign. So the first thing I want to do is isolate those x's. I like to always move so my x's can stay positive if possible. So I'm going to subtract that x over from the one side to the side where I had more x's. So 4x minus x is 3x. So I have 3x minus 6 equals 9. I'm going to add the 6 to the other side. So I get 3x equals 15. Divide both sides by 3. And x equals 5 for my answer. So it took a little bit of algebra to do it, but it really wasn't super rough. It was okay. So we have another problem exactly like that where we just have to figure out the x value again. So again, we know the mid segment, that if we double that, it will equal the end segment. So we're going to have to do 2 times x plus 19, and then it will be equal to x plus 29. And that's what we're going to solve for this problem. So distributing this through, I get 2x, and then I get plus 38, and still I get x plus 29 on the other side because we didn't mess with it. So I always like to get my x's on one side together first, and I always like to move them so I can keep them positive if possible. So I have 2 x's over here and only 1 on the other side, so I'm going to move the 1x to be with the other x's. So 2x minus 1x is just x. So I have x plus 38 equals 29 because those x's canceled over here. I'm going to subtract the 38 to the other side. And I get x equals negative 9 for my solution. All right, couple more problems and we're done here. 31, it says RU equals 40. So from R to U equals 40. And UT equals 4x minus 8. And it says solve for x. Well, we learned on parallelograms that if we had our diagonals drawn, that the diagonals were cut into equal pieces, or they were called, the diagonals were bisectors. So we know those two pieces are equal to each other, so we're just going to go 40 equals 4x minus 8, and we're going to solve for x. So we're going to add the 8 to the other side. So we get 48 equals 4x. Divide both sides by 4. And we get x equals 12 for our solution there. All right, you guys, one last problem and we've made it through this review. Number 32 says find the measure of angle B. Well, here's angle B right here. I have a parallelogram that I'm looking at here. So one thing that I knew about parallelograms is I know that these would be considered consecutive interior angles. And I know that consecutive interior angles have to add together to be 180. So I know those add together to be 180. So I like to look at it this way and I say, well, if they add to be 180 and this one's already 70, then if I take 70 off of 180, then this one has to be 110, because 180 minus the 70 only leaves me 110 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that angle right there, I'm going to set it equal to 110 degrees, and I'm just going to solve it. So I'm going to add that 10 to the other side. So I get 10x equals 120. I'm going to divide both sides by 10. And I get x equals 12 for my final answer. All right, you guys, this was a lot of work. So make sure that you did a good job taking notes on this. Rewatch it if you need to. You can use this as a cheat sheet on your test. Good luck. The test isn't this long. There's a lot of extra problems on here today for you to have some practice. But good luck on your test. Send me an email if you need anything.